allow me to introduce Brenda Sayers of the Hupachasset Nation.
It's good to be here. I just wanted to thank the Green Party of Canada for inviting me here to be a speaker. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'd like to also thank the volunteers, Marlene and Kevin in particular, who drove me around today while I found some new clothes for tonight and some things that I needed because I, of course, lost my luggage. I just wanted to say also what a pleasure it's been to work with Elizabeth May for the last 2 years. Since September 2012, we've been working together on the Canada-China FIPA, as it's called. And I've gotten to know her quite well over the couple of years. Ana hipmasa atikshi sawa. I want to acknowledge the people of this sacred land, the Maliseet, and humbly thank you for allowing me to be here to share this important information with the people here that are attending. Thank you. Uklama Hanataquis. My name is Hanataquis. It was a name given to me by my great-grandmother, and it means a voice to be heard. I was given I was given this name when I was quite young. I was probably in my early 20s, and she had the foresight to see something in me that I didn't see myself. So I'm really grateful for this name. Hisikshakma Hupachasset. I am from Hupachasset. My whole body, including my inner self, is Hupachasset. Unulsi Hupachasset Aksup. I am a woman from Hupachasset. Unulsi Chamasitmasa Kwamuti Yakwi Miti. I want to put everything back in order, like our ancestral people who looked after and respected the land, the rivers, the people, the language, the culture, the dances, how they looked after one another, helped one another. We have gone off track. I want to put everything back in order. A correction needs to be made. Na'ata ich chani. Nahata ich chani. I'm just asking that people pay attention for the next little while I share with you this important message. Some of you might not know where Hupachasset is. We're a small nation of 300 people, and we're located on Vancouver Island in British Columbia. I'd like to tell you the story of how I first heard about the Canada-China Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection Agreement, which I'll call FIPA from here on in. I was sitting in a coffee shop with my girlfriend, and we were talking about Raven Coal, and we were going to set out to fight Raven Coal that wanted to transport coal from our port. And she said to me, "Did you get the email that I sent you?" And I said, "No, I didn't." She says, "Well, you better look at it. It's from Elizabeth May, and it's regarding the Canada-China FIPA." So I was in the restaurant and I had my BlackBerry. So I opened it up and there was a write-up on the agreement. But I couldn't believe it, because I couldn't believe the federal government would actually do something like this to the people of Canada. I was in shock, I was stunned, and I thought to myself, this can't be a real page. This has got to be, one of those pages that are made up. And so I went home and I looked it up on my home computer. And sure enough, there it was. And not only was it there, but it was also on the Government of Canada website. So then for me, I knew that this was a real agreement. I want to thank Elizabeth May. I'm not sure where she is in the room. Oh, there you are, Elizabeth, thank you. for sounding the alarm. And people have said this earlier about Elizabeth May, is that she speaks the truth on behalf of the people, and she speaks it for the good of the people. And I really appreciate your work. Yeah. What I also want to say about FIPA and our fight that we have been up against is that all the necessary elements came together to permit things to happen and to proceed. And you'll see why when I tell you the story. So some people might ask, well, what is a FIPA? In its simplest terms, it is a bilateral agreement to promote foreign investment. When I first heard about FIPA, I went home and I started, Googling, well, what is this about? And whose name came up but Gus Van Harten. Gus Van Harten and Elizabeth May were the only two people speaking about the Canada-China FIPA in this country. And it was very technical. The articles that he wrote were very technical, and because I don't know anything about trade agreements, it took me a while to familiarize myself with what it meant. But one of the things that Gus Van Harten said was, Christy Clark, you better get yourself a lawyer. Why he said that was because the premiers have management rights over the natural resources. So I said to myself, well, if that's true of the premiers, certainly it's true for First Nations. And I'll tell people here something that was really disappointing to me, is that the premiers of each province who had the ability to step in, had the ability to speak on your behalf, had the ability to challenge this agreement, did not step forward on your behalf. So I picked up the phone. I thought, well, I'll phone Gus Van Harten and talk to him. And I did, and I asked him the question. I also talked to my sister Judith Sayers, who's a lawyer. Some of you in the room might know of my sister Judith Sayers. And she said, yes, we're in a position to challenge it. So, because Hupachasat First Nation is so small, we're 300 people, so we have one chief and two councillors. I was an elected councillor at that time, which was part of the ingredients that made this so phenomenal. I was a councillor for 2 years, and this was just before the election that this came out. I did something out of character. I decided that we were too small, we didn't have the capacity, because we have the same amount of portfolios as a nation with 12 or 16 councillors. I picked up the phone and I called across the country. I called the Cree in Saskatchewan. I called the Innu in Labrador. I called the Mohawks. I also called the First Nations Summit, which is in BC. The AFN Regional Chiefs of Quebec, the Northwest Territories in Ontario. The Chiefs of Ontario. The Union of BC Indian Chiefs. Amongst a bunch of other nations and First Nations organizations. And it seemed to me that no one was willing to come forward. And part of the problem was, though, I found, was that no one had heard about it. The other problem is that some of the First Nations that I talked to were looking into doing business with China. So what I did, I'm just going to turn my page here. What I did was I approached our own chief and council. And together we reviewed FIPA. And when we looked at the agreement, we wanted to be in a position that when future generations, we could say to them that we took a stand and we said no. Because this agreement and impact isn't just about, thank you. It's not just about what it's going to do with everyone in this room and your children and grandchildren. It's to do with future generations. And we said to ourselves, they have the same right to clean air, to clean water, and traditional foods of the land. And so what I did was I took a risk and I said to Chief and Council, I promise you that if you agree to proceed with a court challenge, that Hupachesset First Nation will not have to pay any money for the court case, because I will set out on a national fundraising campaign, working with the people of Canada. Because the way that we saw it was, this was not just an agreement that was going to affect First Nations people. It was an agreement that was going to affect all people of Canada. And we looked at this and we said, you know what? We're in this together. We're in this together, and I'm going to appeal to the people of Canada and demonstrate how it's going to affect all people. So we agreed. The court challenge is based on Section 35 of the Constitution of Canada, that Canada says they're to consult with First Nations before they enter into any what's the word? Developments that would affect our Aboriginal rights and title. That's what our court challenge is based on, Section 35. This is an extremely important court case. Never before has a court ruled when and how the federal government should consult with First Nations on international treaties. This would be the first time. But the federal government says, well, we can't really consult with over 600 nations in Canada. But we say differently, because we say, well, you have the ability to consult with the premiers and the municipalities. So you've already got things in place where you can do this. It's not impossible. So from there, I assembled a team. There's actually 3 main volunteers, myself and 2 others, who work on this on a day-to-day basis. We do the strategizing, we do the media, we do the fundraising, we do the communication. It's a big portfolio. But the main team consisted of leadnow.ca. I don't know how many people have heard of Lead Now. Yeah, they're awesome. They're awesome. Council of Canadians. Yeah. Union of BC Indian Chiefs. Yeah. And of course, Green Party of Canada helped us along the way. So I'm happy to say that we were able to raise $200,000 that enabled us together, all people of Canada, to walk through the doors of the federal court. And that was back in June 2013. UBCIC, which Union of BC Indian Chiefs, Chiefs of Ontario, Serpent River First Nation, and Tawasin First Nation all offered affidavits at lower court. And Tawasin First Nation was particularly important to us because they have a modern day treaty, And in the modern day treaty, it states that if the federal government is going to be entering into international agreements, that they must consult with Tawasin First Nation. And so that in itself, our lawyer argued in court, says that they know that entering into international agreements will impact negatively on our First Nations rights and title. There's a funny story about UBCIC, because when I was calling around to all these nations and I didn't get a response the first time, I would call back, I'd email, I would text. And in particular, UBCIC, I did this too. And Grand Chief Stuart Phillip, I don't know how many of you in the room know Grand Chief Stuart Phillip, but he's a wonderful man. And he said to his right-hand man, Don Bain, "Who is this Brenda Sayers that keeps calling me and texting me and and emailing me?" And Don says, "I don't know." "Well, she's talking about some foreign investment agreement with China." So anyways, they decided that, well, maybe they should look into it, because, you know, I wouldn't let go of it. And they did. They looked into it. And next thing you know, they're doing a press release saying that they were opposed to the Canada-China agreement. So we became partners in this as we moved forward. I also got on the phone to organizations like Idle No More. We have the support from them, and as well as the BC Teachers Federation, Unifor, National Farmers Union, which was important to me because of food sovereignty, Canadian Auto Workers Local in Vancouver, the BC Federation of Labour, Kairos, and that's just to name a few. When the decision came down, it came down in favor of Canada. The Chief Justice that overheard the hearings stated that we couldn't prove causal link, meaning that we had no Chinese investment in our territory, and so there was no threat, and we couldn't prove any threat of FIPA adversely affecting our rights and title. Not only did we lose, but people will be surprised to know that we were levied with court fees, even though it was a public interest case, of $110,000. The other thing people will be interested to know is that $90,000 of that was to pay for their expert. That's your tax dollar. Yeah. Gus Van Harten was our expert, and all he wanted was his flight paid for, which he didn't even want us to pay, and a cup of coffee. But that's the thing about FIPA and this challenge that we've undertaken, is that it's attracted people that want to do it because it's the right thing to do. Even our lawyer, Mark Underhill, out of Vancouver, and his partner, Kathy Boyce Parker, are doing this at a reduced rate. And they're looking at it as doing their service to Canada. So here we were, incurred with a debt of $110,000. And Hupachis had just came out of, got her head above water from another legal challenge that we had taken on, and that was to do with the government taking private or crown lands and converting it to private lands in our territory. So we took the federal court to court, federal government to court, and we won. We won that case, but we were in debt for it. So I said to Chief and Counsel, we estimated we needed $110,000 or $300,000, $110,000 for the lower court levied. $35,000 in case we lost that court of appeal and we were levied again with another charge. and then the remainder to the Court of Appeal. And we had a deadline to meet. So I said to them, look, let me go out and see if we can raise this $300,000 in 7 days. That's how much time we had, 300,000. And if we don't meet it, well, then, we'll have to let it go. But at least give me the chance. And I wasn't on council anymore. So they agreed, probably thinking that it was impossible. The next challenge was to convince Lead Now that this was doable. Because, that's a lot of money to raise. And I said to Lead Now, look, let's put it in the hands of the people of Canada. Let's give them the power, their voice, to say, yes, we want to pursue this, or no, we don't want to. And if we get the money contributed, then we'll know that they have a great interest in this court challenge, and that will be enough to, say, let's move on. So I'm really happy to say that, believe it or not, within 5 days, we had raised over $200,000, almost $225,000. So we knew that the interest was there across Canada. And on June the 10th, 2014, just recently, we walked through the doors together, all people of Canada, to the Court of Appeal. So we're currently awaiting the decision. And as Alma had pointed out earlier, the Chilcotin decision came down at the end of June. Yeah, that's awesome. And that's good news for Hupachesset. So our lawyer, Mark Underhill, contacted the 3 justices and said that he wanted to add that to our argument. And of course, they have agreed. So now we have that added to where we are in court, which is good news. I don't know how many people have heard about FIPA. How many people have heard about FIPA in the room? Okay, quite a number of you. Awesome. There are some things that you need to know about FIPA. One of the things that you need to know is that it's with the second largest economy in the world, with China. So they have the power and the means to come into Canada and buy natural resource-based companies. And they're also looking at other sectors to invest into. Currently, my last estimation, China has invested over $27 billion into Canada's natural resource sector. 27 billion. What does that mean? That means if FIPA is ratified, it will give China new powers in Canada. And I'll go over that in a few minutes here. The other thing you need to know is that it was negotiated in secret. If Elizabeth May hadn't caught it, it probably would have been ratified by now. Yeah. There is no press releases, no press conferences, unlike NAFTA, where I believe there's a whole election fought over NAFTA. And in our letter, in our Hupachesset's letter to the Prime Minister, when this first came out, we asked, if this is such a good deal for Canada, Prime Minister, why haven't you announced it to the people? Why haven't you come out and told the people of Canada why it's a good deal? There are 6 important things that you need to know about FIPA. The first thing that you need to know is that it's for 31 years. 31 years. So you have to imagine what the landscape of Canada will look like in 31 years if this is ratified. Because as I said earlier, China has the power and the means to come in and buy natural resource. And it will be out of our control how quickly the natural resources are taken from the land. Unlike NAFTA, that has a 6-month exit clause. So how it works is it's good for 15 years. That's how long the term of the agreement is. But anyone who's within Canada during the first 15 years gets another 15 years. And then there's a 1-year notice, so it's for 31 years. And, you know, if there's 3 words that you need to remember when you walk away from here tonight, it's investor-state arbitration. Investor-state arbitration gives China the power to sue Canada for anything that it sees as getting in the way of them making profit. That could even include a slowdown of the extraction, for example, if someone challenged something in court. It could include things to do with your health. The investor-state arbitration also binds the hands of sub-governments, the provincial government, the municipals, First Nations, from making good decisions on behalf of their citizens. I don't know how many people here are familiar with Lone Pine Resources in Quebec, Quebec put a moratorium on fracking, and now Lone Pine is suing Quebec under NAFTA. And Ethel Corporation, which is an American-based company that wanted to use additives in their gasoline, and Canada said no. And the reason why Canada said no was because it was health risks to women who are pregnant, to babies, to elderly. And those are just 2 examples of what investor-state arbitration might look like. So it's already alive and well in Canada. And the question that people have to ask is, can Canada afford 2 superpowers with the investor-state arbitration clause? Lawsuits launched against Canada by China will be heard by a 3-person tribunal out of Canada's legal jurisdiction. And the other thing that's different from NAFTA with this agreement is that with NAFTA, I mean, I could look up and see what settlements were made to what company, how the panel made the decisions. With the Canada-China FIPA, it would be up to the governments, Canada and China, whether they would release that information to the people of Canada. And to me, you know, that's undermining our constitutional rights. You know, because who is going to pay? Who's going to pay for those? It will come out of the taxpayers' pockets. It will come from cuts from federal government to provinces, federal governments to First Nations. It may affect your health bills. We don't know, because we won't even be able to know how much it is. But we'll definitely see a change in you know, how it will impact you. The other thing that I wanted to mention, the 6th thing, is regarding Enbridge, and I think everybody here is familiar with Enbridge. I think, you know, when it comes to Enbridge, and I hear and read a lot about Enbridge, but I think the important point that people are missing is how FIPA will impact Enbridge. So Nexen, or a China state-owned company bought Nexen for $15 billion about a year ago. They're in the business of mining bitumen. And Northern Gateway is in the business of transporting that bitumen. So if you have and Nexen here who can't transport the bitumen, they can launch an investor-state arbitration. And they could sue Canada in this case for billions of dollars. And that's an important connection to make. And our team just did a document to illustrate the link between the Canada-China FIPA and Enbridge, because it's a really important point that people need to understand. And it's just one small demonstration of what could happen here if the FIPA is ratified. And we'll be releasing that document for people so that they can give that a read through. We've also come up with a document, we're calling it Canada-China FIPA 101. What you need to know. What you need to know. What First Nations need to know. It's a First Nations-based document because our rights and title will be adversely impacted. When you take a look across the country and you see all the resistance to all these natural resource extractions, you know, from the Micmac against fracking, I believe it is, to the Tsawwaitooth in BC, fighting the shipping port. They want to ship oil from their traditional territory there. You know, it makes you wonder whether or not this investor-state arbitration was purposely planted in that in Canada-China FIPA, because it takes away Indigenous rights, and it takes away all of your rights. And it gives the government the green light and to say, well, there's nothing we can do about it, because if we do, then you're going to have to pay through your tax, your income tax. But, you know, the interesting thing is that when we were in Court of Appeal, and one of the justices was needling Canada's lawyer. And the lawyer burst out, you know, when he was talking about First Nations rights and title. Canada will live up to its international obligations. Yeah, that's what they said. My mouth dropped open, right? Yeah. Meaning that they haven't considered anybody else's rights. They're interested in the profits that they'll make. Unusi chamasmasa kwamuti yakwi miti. I want to put everything back in order like our ancestral people who looked after and respected the lands, the river, the people, the language, the culture, the dances, how they looked after another, how they helped one another. We have gone off course. I want to put everything back in order. A correction needs to be made. This is an old prayer from our people back at home. There's a lot more that I could say about the Canada-China FIPA, but I'm going to leave it at that. And I just want to say to everyone here in the room that it's an honor to have served all of you over the past 2 years. I know I don't know any of you very well, but I do know that we have a lot in common. We all have the same basic needs. We all have the same basic desires and dreams. And that's how we're all connected. And, you know, I truly believe that the people of Canada, if we pull together, we can defeat this Canada-China FIPA. But Hupachesset needs your help. We need your support. We're a small nation. And we need people to exercise their voices, exercise their constitutional rights, and say no. You need to say no.
No!
No! Because if we don't do that at this critical point in time, then I truly believe that Canada, our country, will not be the same. So I'll leave that with you. I want to thank you all for your patience and for your ear and for listening. I appreciate the time. Thank you.